Hi, this is Kevin Trainer. Welcome to my tutorial for the IS430 final project. We're going to be talking about exercise one in this particular recording. And I want to begin by saying that exercise one and the rest of the final project use data similar to a prior assignment that we've had during the semester. And they're only the same in the respect that that prior assignment inspired this final project. So if you go back and compare the data and the details, there's a lot of similarities, but some of the differences are significant. So that's why I decided that I was going to do a full tutorial video for this exercise one. Okay, so pay attention to the details here rather than what you might remember from a previous assignment. Okay, so I'm in my tutorial project, and first of all, I need to bring over some data, right? So I'm going to do our typical, I'm going to create a directory named data. It's going to hold that data. Okay, and let's take a peek at the starter files for the final assignment. Um, we have our old friend, the empty file.txt. So all the programs that we write that process a text input file should be able to end gracefully if we provide them with this empty file.txt. And then I've got, oh, this shouldn't be here. There's always a little thing that I find while we're doing this. So we're going to be working with expense records like we did in a prior assignment. But in this case, it's going to be for a company that has operations in three countries, the US, the UK, and France. Okay, and so we're going to process all of those and then we're going to go on to summarize them. So we're going to bring over all the data that we're going to be using, the empty file and the expense records for all three countries. So I'm going to go and do a copy from that. And then I'm going to go to my project and I'm going to paste it into the data subdirectory. Okay, so I'm going to add all three of those. Okay, and while we're here, there is one program that we're going to use that I decided to give you instead of have you create. And this is this join selected summarized expenses. So while we're here, let's just bring that over to. So I'm going to copy this. And we're not going to use it in the current tutorial, but we will use it later in the final project. So I'm just going to go to the name of the project and right click and paste and say OK. And oh, I've got my version control on, so I'm going to get those inquiries. Okay, so that's not in data. That's just one of the programs that'll be in the final project, and you'll get a chance to use that later on. Okay, so let's take a look at the data that we have. The empty file is just empty. You remember that. Okay. We're going to be working on these U.S. expense records in exercise one. And you'll notice that it's the proper comma separated values file, CSV, in that the first line has the column headers, and then the column header is separated by commas, and then each of the data lines has the data values also separated by commas. Okay, and although it's possible in some comma separated value files to have fields that are separated by double quotes, we don't have any of that in this file. Okay, so we can do the typical thing, and we don't have these in any of the data files that I'm going to be giving you for the final project. Okay, so we can just read the data and split the record. Okay, because these records are for the U.S. operations of the company. The date format is in a U.S. Format for date, month, day, year. That won't be true of the other data files because they're from European operations. The expense categories are let's see, rent, salaries and benefits, meals and entertainment, vehicle lease, utilities, and somewhere there's one for fuel. Okay, turns out we're going to be concentrating this time on fuel. Okay, and the amounts are in US dollars. This is from the US operations, so they're already stated in US dollars. Now that's not going to be true of the other files that we get. The UK file and the FR file for France are going to be in other currencies. So they're going to have a different date and they're going to have a different currency, and you're going to have to be able to translate those. Okay, but not so for this one. Okay, and there are, I think this one has 20,000 records. It does, 20,000 in the header record. And the reason why, and this is the most of the records of all three files, and the reason is that this company has more operations in the US than it has in England or France. Okay. In fact, it has the most in the US. It has less in England and a little bit less than that in France. Okay. So the number of transactions that they have are fewer. Okay. So this is going to be the input to the program that we are creating. All right. Okay. So, what are we going to create? Well, I'm going to create this first program with you. Of course, it's a Python file, and it's called US underscore select and summarize. Okay? Okay, so we're going to select just the records that we're interested in, and we are going to summarize them. And again, this is reminiscent of an assignment that we did earlier in the semester, but the details may have changed. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is bring over the code from my already baked version. Okay. So of course we're going to begin with a somehow I didn't get all of my doc string. So we're going to begin with a proper doc string. And here we are. It says selects and summarizes qualifying U.S. expense records. And then we skip a line because that's what we do in these doc strings when there are multiple lines, and it prints a report and it writes the summarized file. Okay, and we're going to skip a couple lines, and now we're going to go take a look at main. And the first thing to recognize here is that in this exercise, we're going to be creating this program so it can easily be called from a Jupyter notebook. So one of the last things that we do in the final project, not the very last if we're doing the challenge, but the last if we're not doing the challenge, is to take all the programs that we have here and to document the workflow of them by creating a Jupyter notebook to run all of the programs in the workflow. Okay, so to do that, we're going to use the convention that we used in our unit on Jupyter notebooks. We're going to have both a main, which is going to run the test, and then we're going to have a top-level function called the same name as the program with the word do in front of it. Do, US, select, and summarize. Okay, and we're going to begin by defining all of the key variable values, okay, just in the same way we would do in a Jupyter notebook, and then we call the do function, okay. And what we're going to do here, because we have because I'm providing you with predicted output values, we can use the live data for testing. Okay, if you were doing this on your own, you wouldn't know the proper answers for the live data file. So you'd have to create a test data file yourself that would be different than the production data file. But I'm saving you some effort here because I already have the official answers, and I'm going to publish them in the instructions. Okay, so let's get a look at this top level function. Okay, so I'm going to bring that over from my already baked version and skip 2 blank lines and paste this in. And again, it's called do US, select, and summarize. Okay, and it's getting the target year that we're selecting. Records have to match the year. There's a target category. The records have to match that category. There's the name of the data directory, so we can form a proper path. There's the input file name and there's the output file name. They're both going to be in the data directory. Okay, and this top level logic only does a couple of things. One is it builds a list of expense accumulators. These are accumulated values for each of the months in the target year. And it does that in a function called select and accumulate qualifying records. And again, we pass the data directory, the input file name, the target category, the target year. And what we get back is just a list of these expense accumulators. Okay, and these, because we're dealing with floats, this is a list of floats. Okay, and there are 12 of them, one for each of the months. And of course, their indexes are 0 through 11. All right. And then once we have this list of expense accumulators, we do two things with it. One is that we print a report so that you can see it and compare your answers to my predicted output. Okay. Um, and the other one is we create a summary file that we're going to pass on to the next part of the workflow. And these are the same information, one in printed form and the other one in you know a data file form. Okay, and um, uh, we're passing the expense accumulator and the target category and the target year to the print analysis report. And you might say, well, why do we still need the target category and the target year? Well, we need them because that helps us to form the title of the report. Okay. And we have the create summary file. And again, we are passing the expense accumulators. That's not surprising. And then the data directory and the output file name. That's not surprising either. Because we have to write to a file. But again, we're passing the target category and the target year. And that's because we're including those on the summary records so that when we move to the next phase of the workflow, we have documented in the data what category this is for and what year this is for. And then again, since we're going to be doing some eventual reporting from that, that's going to allow us to include both the category and the year in the heading of the report and make it more user friendly. Okay. All right, so that's that. Okay. What I'm going to do for right now is I'm going to put everything but select and accumulate qualifying records into a comment so we can add the next part and we can do some testing. Okay, so the next thing is this select and accumulate qualifying records. Okay. And here we are. I guess we have too many blank lines before that. Okay, and this is pretty similar to code that we were using earlier in the semester. But again, it's got more details, so pay attention. That's why I decided to do a new tutorial. Okay, and turns out that this calls parse US date. So I'm just going to bring that over right now because we're going to need it in a minute or two. Okay. All right, and then we'll walk through this code that we just added. Okay. Okay, so what do we do when we select and accumulate the qualifying records? Well, we need to open the input file. Okay. We need to create a list of expense accumulators. There are 12 floats that are set to 0. We're going to need to count lines red, and we're going to need to count qualifying records. Okay? Because it's only the qualifying ones that we're going to accumulate. So we're going to do the typical for line and in file. Okay? And we're accumulating the line count. And the thing to remember is when we're dealing with these proper comma-separated value files and we're reading them, we need to not process the first line of the file that has the column headers on it. Okay, so we check if the line count is greater than 1, and we only do our processing if we're not working on that header line. Okay, so we split the line, we get the date, the category, and the amount as string. Okay, um, and we're going to have to do our selection based upon the year. Okay, and to do that, we need to get the year out of the date. We're eventually going to need the month out of the date as well. So here is where we call this parse US date, and we pass the string for date that we have. Okay, and it turns out that the date that we have is going to be uh, 2 digits a month, 2 digits a day, 4 digits of a year. So we split on the slashes and we take the month as string, the day as string, the year as string, and then we convert the three of those to ints and we send them back. Okay, when you're dealing with the other two programs that you're going to write for the other two files, you're going to have to remember that the order of European dates is different than US dates. Okay? Um, so here's where we did this. So now that we know that what the year is, we're going to say if the year of the record that we're on is equal to the target year and the category is equal to the target category, then we're going to accumulate it. Okay, so um, we need to count, increase the count on qualifying records. We need to turn that string into a float because it's a float, and we need to add it to the accumulator for this month, which is the month minus 1, because the months run from 1 to 12, and the indexes of the accumulators run from 0 to 11. The other thing that you need to remember at this point is that we're using this amount as is. Okay, so we're not using any kind of a currency conversion factor to convert the currency on this one because it's from US operations and our report's going to be in US dollars. But on the other two, for the UK and France, you're going to have to remember to convert the currency at this point. So now we can close the file and we can print a couple of polite messages that tell us that we read the right number of lines, okay, and how many records we accumulated, okay, and then we return the list expense accumulators, okay. So at this point, we ought to be able just to run this and show that it works. Of course, we need a call to main down at the bottom. So we're not going to be able to see the output. Well, we can see that we read 20,001 lines, and that's right. And we have 749 qualifying expense records. And I know that's right because I know what the right answers are. Okay, well, that's good. So we did the first part, although we haven't seen the output. So let's go back and let's go back to the do function, which is kind of the new main, right? When we're doing this approach to make the programs callable from a Jupyter notebook. Okay, and let's just take the next part, which is to print the analysis report. And One might argue that this is more of a summary report than an analysis report, but there's a later report in the workflow that's clearly more of a summary report. So that's what I called this. So again, to do this, we're passing the expense accumulators, the target category, and the target year, which are going to help us to form the title. Okay, so let's go over and bring over print analysis report for my already coded version. All right. And this is going to look pretty similar to code that you've already seen from the regular semester, except that the report's a little fancier. Okay. Uh, we want to make it clear that this is the report for US operations because it's coming from the US file. And we're going to print summary of, and this is the category. In our case, we're going to be looking for fuel. So summary of fuel expenses for, and the year that we're looking for is 2020. And we have column heads for the month and the amount in US dollars. And we go through we have a 4 in range 12, which is going to get us exactly the indexes that we want. So the indexes can be just I, but when we print the number of the month, we have to remember to add 1. Okay? And we're using commas and 2 decimal places. Okay, so this should do this. Let's give this a run. And of course, we saw this summarization output before. And here's a report, U.S. operations, summary of fuel expenses for 2020. And we have each of the months, and we have the amount in U.S. dollars. And again, there was no conversion there because it's U.S. operations. You'll have to remember to convert the other. You'll have to remember to convert the other country operations, UK and France. Okay, so we have a lot of good stuff here, but we haven't created the file that gets passed on in the workflow. Okay, so we need to do that. Okay, and that's this code here that we had put into a comment, so let's uncomment that. Okay, and this is called a create summary file. And again, we're passing the accumulators, but we need to pass the data directory and the output file name in order to open and write to that file. And we need the target category and the target year because that is going to be included on the records. Okay, and this is what allows us in the next operation, which is going to be summarization. It's going to allow us to do that properly. Okay. Okay, we've got this, but the code that we're calling isn't here yet. So let's add this last function, create summary file. Okay. So in this create summary file, I guess we need a couple of blank lines before we call main. Again, we're getting in the parameters. We are opening out file. We are printing the printing the column header line. So this is what we're going to have. We're going to put the country in here. even though the name of the country is going to be on the file, we want to be clear that this is for, in this case, the US. The category, the month, the year, and the amount in US dollars. Okay? And then we're just going to go create the records. Okay? So for month in range 1 to 13, okay, I kind of did this the opposite of the way I did the other loop. The loop in the report, I just did a range 12 and I adjusted what I printed. Here I did range 1 to 13 and I adjust the index. Okay. The content that we're going to print is US, comma, the category name, comma, the month, comma, the year, comma, the expense accumulators. Okay? And somehow I seem to have a space in there that I don't need. So the expense accumulators, and we're going to get the one for the month that we want, and we want to make sure that we've got 2 decimal places on it. Okay, I tend to break up the formatting of the line from the printing of the line when I have a lot to print and I'm printing to something other than the console. I think it reads a little better, right? If we had tried to put all this on one line, it would have gone past the limit. Okay. And then we close the out file, and then we're going to print a polite message that says this summary file was created as, and then we have the output file name. Okay, so this should be it. Let's run this. Okay. And the report looks just the same, except that we now say summary file was created as US summarized target expenses. Okay, that looks good. Yeah, that looks fine. Now, where's the file? Well, it should be US summarized target expenses, so let's open that. All right. And this is what we're looking at here. Okay, so we've got the column header that we were expecting, plus we've got 12 lines of data, one for each of the 12 months. It says it's for the US, it's fuel, and then the number of the month, the year 2020, and the amount with 2 decimal places of accuracy. Okay, and the very last thing is we have an empty line, just what we want. Before we wrap up here, I need to correct one problem that I found in subsequent testing, and that is this. So if we go look at our program, at the very bottom, we just have a call to main. And this is going to work fine for things that we just want to run directly from PyCharm or directly from the command line. However, if we want to import it and use it, import it and call in a Jupyter notebook, we're going to have a more complex version of this call. And you will recall that this that I'm pasting in now is the more complex version. And so the main is only going to run if we're testing it here at in PyCharm, or we might be testing it from the command line. But when we import it into a Jupyter Notebook, it's not going to run on import. And that was the problem I was having when I was doing my subsequent testing. So I just want to confirm that this still works. So let's run it again. And it looks like it still works just fine. And we'll look at our records. Those still work just fine. Okay. So we're meeting all the requirements now. it will it will be called from a Jupyter notebook in a subsequent exercise of the final project. So wanted you to be ready for that. This is the only exercise tutorial that I'll be doing for the final project. The rest of the exercises are very similar to something that we did on a weekly coding assignment, and I'll be pointing out what they're similar to. So I wish you luck on the rest of the final project, and I'll say bye until next time. Bye-bye.